been quite a few years now at this point, but a while ago I made a video describing the first season of Amphibia. At one point I was thinking about trying to do another review that was discussing my thoughts on the rest of the series. And then I got to thinking more. I haven't really talked about Gravity Falls, or another one that actually appeared in the comments of that Amphibia video, The Owl House. So, it's my channel. I figure, why not just make a video discussing my thoughts on all three of these monumental series? Series? Maybe it's just series. Let's start where arguably this trend started for the Disney Channel with Gravity Falls. Now, as you can see, I actually have this one on DVD. The main reason to note this is that this was before Disney Plus was a thing. And I do remember hearing that there was quite a petition to actually get this out onto DVD as. Well, that was something that Disney just didn't really do a lot at the time for their series. So the idea that there was this much length going to getting this on a physical media, as well as hearing really good things from friends, I figured I would just buy it and see what all the fuss is about. I could distinctly remember it as I was just watching my parents' house for the day. I had a friend over and I'm just like, hey, you want to watch Gravity Falls? And he was just like, sure. So we watched the very first episode. And there I was very much drawn into this world of Gravity Falls. Where did the journals come from? And what on earth is lying in Grunkle Stan's basement? That was the first episode. It would take a lot more episodes after that before any of those questions brought up in that first episode would be remotely answered. Now, a lot of people say that this is a trend that shows at that time as well as today. They start out real simple and then all of a sudden the story kicks in and then it starts getting more and more complex. This is something I was used to as I was also watching Steven Universe at the time. However, I was just not that big a fan of the filler arc. I found the story itself rather interesting when it actually happened, but when the series was not focused on the story, I'm just like, here we go again. Another episode where I'm not going to know anything. And after quite a few filler episodes, I was almost tempted to just kind of stop watching in general, but then I reminded myself, I spent money on this. I should probably watch it through to the end. And by the time I got to the end, the filler episodes went away and the story episodes started to come into place. And that is when I started to get vested. In terms of how much I like or hate Gravity Falls, it's pretty hard to dictate, as I feel like it's a bit of a show of two halves. When it's the story, it's great. When it's the filler, can we just go back to the story? I've found that far more engaging than what else was going on in some of these episodes. However, there is a little bit of a Venn diagram where both cross over. There are some episodes that are seemingly filler, but they do have some story going on into them. I think the biggest thing that I appreciate Gravity Falls for is what it did. It's been pretty well documented that the creator, Alex Hurst, had quite a difficult time trying to get past the censors. And what did end up being put in here, I was very amazed at, because I'm a big fan of old cartoons, like Bugs Bunny, Popeye, Tom and Jerry. And whenever I watch those cartoons, I always kind of stop and say, well, wouldn't be able to get away with that nowadays. I think Alex Hurst, as well as Gravity Falls, said that you could. And that is probably the biggest thing that I appreciated for. That, as well as really ushering in a new era for Disney shows. At that point, most things were just kind of episodic. Occasionally it might get a two-parter here and there, but this is where we really started to see the beginning of story-driven narratives in Disney shows. This is probably the closest thing I can come up with in terms of an Ida cosplay. It's pretty easy to come up with a Mabel cosplay, as she's mostly wearing turtlenecks and I've already got brown hair. And I don't really know a whole lot about dyeing to be able to get white hair out of this, and obviously I'm not going to be removing my nail polish for this. But probably the first thing to note about the Owl House. Notice I am holding nothing in either of my hands. This is because I only ever saw this show on Disney Plus. And to my knowledge, I don't think it ever made it to physical media. And I think that is quite a shame. I am a really big fan of physical media. I kind of grew up in an area where the internet would just kind of go in and out, and, well, you have no internet, you have no streaming. So, if you have physical media, all you just need is electricity and a player for said physical media. But on to the Owl House itself. Well, I just finished the first season of Amphibia, and it looked like it was going to be a little while. In fact, I was even wondering if there was going to be a rest of the show after finishing season 1. So I figured I would move into another show that I've heard just as great of things about, The Owl House. And on Disney Plus is where I saw it. Now, ordinarily when I watch these shows, I like to watch them while I'm having dinner. Well, I can tell you that trying to watch The Owl House while trying to eat is not a very good idea. The Owl House reminded me a lot of shows from the 90s. There was quite a fair bit of gross-out humor, which, as you can tell, me trying to eat during that doesn't work together. And on top of that, it was kind of another one of those shows where I was kind of sucked into it. I laughed at the very first joke they had where Luz is impersonating one of her stories and the main baddie just goes, "Oh, my main weakness, dying." See, even that cracks me up now. But when Luz goes into the world of the Owl House, it's been a while since I last seen the series, so I forget if there was a name for it. I was really getting vested. It's like, okay, we're in a fantastic new world already. Let's see what this is all about. And on top of that, we are given some intrigue with who this Ida is and who King is. And in all honesty, I was very disappointed by the conclusion of that first episode. Because this fantastic crown that King was looking for was just a Burger King crown. And on top of that, I felt like there was about 5 episodes of story in just this one episode, and it just felt like it was really trimmed down, as if it was just put in one of those hydraulic presses and just slowly and slowly compressed until we got this weird amalgamation. And then the second episode came in, and it honestly made me think a lot of Lonely Island's I Threw It on the Ground. Like, right after he destroyed the kid's birthday party, he just says, "Welcome to the real world." And that's very much what it felt like. So instead of having this fantastic, magical world, it just turns out most of it is kind of fake. And this is very much reinforced with the idea that Luz is sent on a quest. And it turns out that it was just a hologram, and while there is magic in this world, it's not very engaging. At least it wasn't for me anyway. It started to pick up steam a little bit in the idea that there was a magic academy that Luz wanted to be a part of, but Ida had a bad history with them, so it's kind of the idea of the institution versus the rebel. With Gravity Falls, I probably got about halfway through before I was really contemplating not finishing the series. And with The Owl House, I was probably maybe like an episode or 2 into the Magic Academy when I'm just like, this isn't doing anything for me. It's not really grabbing me. But then I keep hearing all these great things about the show. Okay, I'm gonna rewatch it again from the beginning, and I'm gonna see it through to the end. And yeah, it was quite a slog for a very long time for me. It wasn't until Luz was able to contact the human world that I started to get engaged, and I can't help thinking that's at least in season 2 offhand. But by then, I was curious to see where the story was going to go. By then, the characters were established enough, and the lore was established enough. I wanted to see what they were going to do with it. And yeah, when I got to the end, I was just like, okay. I mean, it was good. I don't really see why people see the show as fantastic, but it's good. But I guess a lot like Gravity Falls, it's something that I appreciate for what it did. And if you know a thing or two about me, you probably know what these things are. So it's nice that we have a bit of a non-binary representation in Rain. However, personally, I'm a bigger fan of Double Trouble from She-Ra, so take your pick, but I feel like that was still kind of an impressive thing. And on top of that, the relationship between Luz and Amity. I love the idea that they're just being treated as two regular lovers. It's not played up for shock value like a lot of other lesbian couples on television. Well, actually, is it really safe to really say it's a lesbian couple, as Luz is confirmed to be bi, but I'm not really sure what Amity is confirmed to be as? Either way, I did love the idea that the relationship was just treated like a relationship. But other than that, I don't know. With Gravity Falls, I wouldn't mind trying to give it another shot and maybe see if I can find what other people have seen in it that I've missed. But with The Owl House, I don't know. After finishing it, I'm like, okay, I guess I got the gist. I'm not really all that interested. And that leads to Amphibia. Well, the idea I'm wearing an Amphibia t-shirt should be an indication as to how much I love this show. I've probably seen it from the beginning to the end at least 3 times. And I swear, every time I rewatch it again, I find one other little detail that I did not notice the other successive times I've seen it. Like, one detail I only picked up on this most recent watch through is that when Anne is attempting to protect Sprig from the giant red praying mantis, if you look really closely, her eyes start to glow blue a little bit. And just little bits and pieces like that. The idea that each of the friends landed in a different section of Amphibia. Anne is for the frogs, Marcy is for the newts, and Sasha is for the toads. And on top of that, you kind of get an idea that there is a bit of a color scheme between the two. That Anne is blue, Marcy is green, and Sasha is red. For me, it's just, what is there not to love? I love the characters, I love the references, I love the sense of humor that even though I've seen the show a few times already, I'm still catching myself laughing out loud at the jokes. In fact, there's 2 really interesting references to mention in Amphibia. So, in one episode, Alex Hirsch basically revives his role from Gravity Falls to create the Curator, which is a frog, Grunkle Stan. And you also have Zeus. And they have their own form of the Mystery Shack. And once again, I feel like there is that little bit of trying to push the envelope when all the exhibits start to revolt against the Curator. They catch him in this tiny little room, and all of a sudden red liquid starts pouring from underneath the door. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe they're getting away with this. And then you just barely hear Alex in the background just kind of going, yeah, calm down, everybody, it's only wax. And then they follow that up with the group meeting together just free of the curator. And Anne's just like, well, at least everybody made it out alive. To which Hop Pop's just like, except for that curator guy, he's dead. I love that sort of matter-of-fact tone that the show has. And the other fun thing to mention as well is that there is a small nod to the Owl House, as when they start getting portal technology, one of the portals that opens up is to the Owl House itself. And speaking of which, that's one thing I forgot to mention, so it's fun to note that Alex Hurst was the voice of King, which, if you've seen Gravity Falls to the end, you'll know it's basically the same voice he's putting on for Bill Cipher. But it's still just kind of fun to see that all three of these series have a connection somehow. So it's one of those things. I could probably just go on and on explaining why I love Amphibia so much, but I feel like I was able to encapsulate most of my opinions in that video I made all those many years ago, so I just wanted to give a general summary of it. And yeah, it's just kind of a little rule of mine that if you reference Gulliver's Third Travel, okay, I should probably try to explain that reference. So, a lot of people might know about the classic story Gulliver's Travels. There's been several movies based off of it, or at least one of them anyway. So there was actually 4 travels. The first, Gulliver is a giant in a land of very little people. The second journey is the reverse. He's the really little person in the land of giants. The third one involves a castle in the sky called Laputa. And the fourth one involves him going to a place where horses are the ones that were given the ability to be able to think, to reason, as well as have a consciousness. Out of those 4, the fourth one is my personal favorite, but as for that third tale, Castle in the Sky is my favorite of the Ghibli movies, and Amphibia makes quite an homage to that castle. And I was also surprised to see that it even snuck in a few Terminator references as well. So yeah, out of all the 3 series I mentioned, Amphibia is my personal favorite. Gravity Falls, I feel like I should give it a watch again, as I feel like I've kind of missed something. Like a lot of people say, it's one of the greatest shows of all time. While me, I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's okay. And then The Owl House. I don't know, I just don't have a desire to watch it again. It's not that it was necessarily bad. It just didn't grab me as much as Amphibia or Gravity Falls did. And before I start getting comments, I figure I'll throw in one last bonus review. There are many instances I'm able to use the blonde wig, but I think this time it actually could make a little sense. So, the last show to mention as well is Star versus the Forces of Evil. This is a rather unique one, as I never really heard what the general reception was of the show until a long time after it was finished. The first time I ever heard of the show, I remember I was just at one of my relatives' house, either during a Christmas party or Thanksgiving, one of the two, where one of my aunts was upstairs watching the Disney Channel because Toy Story 2 was on. And one of the things they were advertising that Disney was going to be running the entirety of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, episode 1 to the second to last episode in one successive run for like 2.5 weeks or something. And the main reason that stuck out to me is because the ad was just like, well, see all the major differences. See what Star's bust size is by the end. I still can't tell if that was a Mandela effect or if I actually heard that. But anyway, I started with Star vs. the Forces of Evil after I found myself rather disappointed by The Owl House. And for a while, I was having a lot of fun with it. But then the story started to kick in. Personally, I love Star vs. the Forces of Evil when it was an episodic series. In fact, my favorite episode has to be the one where Star forgets to pay for her magic mirror, so she, as well as Marco's friends, all have to go to a land of pixies, I believe, to be able to pay for it. And it just goes so crazy. It was just hilarious, and I was enjoying that. The more pudgy of Marco's friends ended up marrying one of the pixie queens, but then he decided to have a divorce. I loved it. In fact, probably the thing that sold me on the show was the second episode where Star misinterprets a football game as gladiatorial combat. So not only does she have armor, but then she sets traps all over the field to take out the enemy team. See, now that was fun. I enjoyed that. In fact, hearing how much I'm laughing about it, you can see how really into it I was getting. And then the story started to kick in. And, well, unlike the other shows, I wasn't really expecting there to be much of a story. I thought it was just going to be a big episodic run. And I'm like, you know what? This is fun. The story with Toffee, I could get behind that. That was interesting. Get like a big baddie that Star would really have to focus on rather than the comedic relief that Ludo was. But then Toffee gets defeated, and then Ludo somehow has to pick up his life with only a spider and a hawk while he's the whole time wearing a potato chip bag. I was not really interested in this. I mean, I was enough to see where it was gonna go, but I wanted to get back to the crazy hijinks about a magical girl being in a normal world. That is where I found the interest. But as the story went on, it at least got a little more interesting. I do remember hearing that there were some people kind of questioning this Eclipsa in the idea of, is she good or is she evil? Personally, I think it was just the way the Magical High Commission was painted, but it just seemed like they were a whole bunch of... It's hard to really say racists. Are monsters a race? But just kind of that general idea that the main reason that they hated Eclipsa is because she married a monster. And there's been a clash between monsters and humans for a very long time. And it was just the idea of how they tried to sweep all of this under the rug by saying, no, we made the right call. We did the best. We have your best interests in mind. I just knew Eclipsa was just a victim, and I'd been kind of in that situation in a few ways, so I found myself really rooting for Eclipsa and just saying, wow, this Magical High Commission really needs to go. And a lot of people like to talk about the finale of Star vs. the Forces of Evil. Like I said, I was more interested when the show was in episodic content. So when the story started to keep going, I'm just kind of like, okay, so Toffee is alive and he's possessing the magic of the wand. Okay, I can roll with this. Oh, so apparently the head of that reform school was actually the long-lost daughter. Okay, I can get behind that. Star wants to destroy the forces of magic. Okay, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the end? Sure, I can get along with that. It was an odd combination of being vested as I was curious as to where the story was going to go, but I wasn't really caring that much. I didn't really feel like I was offended or the rug was taken out of me or anything. It was just like, okay, so this is where this story's going. Let's go with it. But probably the biggest thing that I did really like about the show, between Star Butterfly and Tulip Olsen, I believe her last name is, from Infinity Train, I was very jealous about the quote-unquote kids programming that the kids of this modern generation were getting. It was nice to be able to see a female protagonist that was a character. I grew up in an era where a female character was more of a template. Either they pretended they were strong, but then they would get captured anyway, and so the big man would have to come in and rescue them. Or they were just so obsessed with love that it was always a bit of a comedy that the main character would just be like, oh no, get off me, I don't care about you. Kind of like the whole Amy Rose and Sonic relationship. And then there were some where they were just hot. That was it. The storytellers wanted to figure out how to get this female character into a bikini and whatnot. And so the idea that there was a female character that was more than just those three tropes, I liked it. And on top of that, there was just something so energetic about Star. She just seemed like the kind of person that I would have loved to have her as a best friend when I was going through junior high school. She just seems like the kind of person that if you're having a bad day, you could just always go to her and she'll find a way to brighten it up for you. And a lot of people might complain that in the beginning she's a bit of a ditz, but I kind of look at it like Sailor Moon, which if you've seen Star vs. the Forces of Evil, you can definitely see the Sailor Moon influence. But it's the idea that the character kind of starts off like a typical teenager, but then they start to assume their responsibilities in their magic. So by the end of the series, it really gets to a point where you've seen them grow as a character. I think that's all the major Disney shows that I can talk about. I hope you're not disappointed that I didn't use any clips from any of these shows, but A, I'm not really sure how I can get my hands on them, and B, this is just a lot easier to edit because I don't have to worry about trying to fend off copyright strikes or trying to be able to convert video signals or reverse the picture or any of this other crazy stuff. So just me talking to the camera, it's a lot easier. So these are my thoughts on the shows. I'd be very curious to see where your thoughts are. And hey, as for Gravity Falls and Owl House, I'm always curious to hear what other people got out of it because, well, not to say I didn't get anything out of either show, it was just more, I don't really understand why they're held in such high esteem. But I'm willing to listen as to what you got out of it, and perhaps I can go in either of these series with a new light. Until next time, keep having fun.